is called to order. Welcome, everyone. This is the World's Best Workforce Annual Public Meeting. All members are present, and please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have Dr. Heisted. You want to start us off here?
Andy's my lead-in.
Oh, Andy's the lead-in.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Superintendent Fujitaki, school board members, public. We're excited to be here for our World's Best Workforce Annual Public Meeting. We've got a couple different parts to the meeting. You already introduced Dr. Heisted. He'll give us some work on our achievement results, and then I'll let the people to my right and your left introduce themselves.
Rachel Jens, Curriculum and Instruction Director.
Kelly Spees, Teacher Evaluation Coordinator.
Eric Melby, Assistant Superintendent.
We also have behind us Aaron Boltick from Gifted and Talented, and Beth Stengline, EL. So we've got everyone represented here. I will turn it over to Dr. Heisted to get started on our achievement results.
Thanks, Chair Steigoff, Superintendent Fujitaki, Board Directors. This brief 20-minute presentation is substantially similar to what you've seen before. What we've added to it are additional goals and graphs related to the world's best workforce. The legislature set out the world's best workforce goals. Every district must do this type of annual report on the 5 major goals. The first goal is to have all students ready for kindergarten. And so we use our Bloomington Early Kindergarten Assessment, which has been validated with the MAP test and with the MCA. It predicts first grade reading really well, and it even predicts third grade reading very well. To be predicted to be proficient in third grade literacy, you have to have a score in literacy of 80 or higher. So we incrementally have increased that percentage across time, but this year we went a different direction. So in 2017, we had 53.2% of students at proficiency level, and this last, and the goal we set was 48.6, and our result was 44.9%. And so we went down a little bit. We have looked at the data, and it looks like we have certain providers that are sending students to us with higher levels of skills. Our K-5 programs are producing higher results than some other sites. We can do more diagnostics on this, and we are going to be giving feedback to our pre-K providers to tell them how their students are doing, and there's efforts within the innovation zone to help them prepare students both for literacy and numeracy. In third grade, all students need to read well by the end of third grade. We define that as the 50th percentile on the MAP test, the Measures of Academic Progress. It's been nationally normed on over 2 million students in the country. We have made good progress on this over the years, but this particular year, our goal was set at 65.5%, and we had a result of 62.1%, which is a little bit more than 3 points below our goal. So rather than increasing by 2%, we decreased by 1.4%. In the third goal, we're looking at racial ethnic achievement gaps, and we look at both proficiency and growth. But in this case, we're using the MCA proficiency results. And what we're asked to do by the state is to take the percentage who are proficient, who are white students, and subtract each of the other racial ethnic groups for those gaps, and then full-price lunch, students who receive full-price lunch versus students who receive free or reduced-price lunch. Now, I would say that the white students and students who are receiving full-price lunch have gaps too. You know, we don't have 100% of our students reaching the standards, but this is the way they have defined it for the world's best workforce. In this case, we set a goal of 38% for the difference between white and Hispanic students. We know that there are large language differences for Hispanic students versus white. We didn't quite hit that goal of reducing the gap by 2%. Instead, we increased the gap by about 8%. In the case of white versus African American students, we did see a gap reduction. We set a goal of 32.5% gap, and we're down to 31.1% gap. So in the green, I highlighted in green that we hit that target. We also hit the target for full-price lunch versus free and reduced-price lunch. Again, we set a goal to decrease 2%, and we actually lost about 2.3% of that gap. So we still have these huge gaps, 34% between students in poverty and students who are receiving full-price lunch. Our graduation rate has increased every year over the past 5 years until this year. It leveled off a little bit. We're using a 7-year graduation rate now. We set a target for 93.2% of our students graduating within 7 years, and we fell short of that. We were at 91.6%. The final area, and there are going to be some other graphs related to college and career readiness, but one of our goals in this area was to increase the percentage of students who score an 18 or higher on the ACT. We set a goal of 69.4, and this past year we had 70.4% of the students having that. And that's a combination of high scores for students who typically would have taken the ACT in the past, but we've added more students to the pool. So we have over 80% of our students now taking the ACT, and they're scoring higher. So that's a good predictor for being able to get into college and to be successful in college. So I wanted to start with that particular slide as a summary and then go through some of the detail. But are there questions on this particular slide? Director Bergstrom.
Yes, David, first of all, thank you all for coming. Appreciate you giving your time and energy to this report. Just a quick question. David, you talked about the goals. Can you help me understand or just run over how you set goals? How do we set those goals? Where do we get those numbers?
Yeah, there is no real scientific standards for setting goals. What the state would like us to do is to set SMART goals, meaning that they're measurable, but they're achievable. So they're supposed to be stretch goals, but still achievable. And what we found in the past through our QComp goals is that an increase of 2% on the MCAs is a fairly large increase, given that the state has increased about 0.5% over the past 7 years. To go up 2% is significant. On our growth goals, we usually set a 3% increase. In this case, I set a 2% decrease for the gap goals, similar to the proficiency goals. And then graduation rate, once you get up in the 90s, it's really hard to go at a 2% rate, so we set the goal at 1%. So The ACT goal, I also set at 2%, and I was really pleased to see that. I wasn't expecting we'd jump that much, but we did. I use the historical trends to see what's typical, what is achievable from past practice, not just for Bloomington, but for the state as a whole, and then try to do that. In the future, I might ask my colleagues to set these goals because it shouldn't have to be the statistician, but I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yep. So the next slide, it went blank. Oh, no, I did the wrong button. That's my problem. Okay, the next slide you've seen already, but we see trends in free and reduced lunch have been fairly stable. In 17-18, we did increase a point and a half. We're at 41.4% of our students receiving free and reduced price lunch. Special education numbers have increased so that now almost 14% of the students are special ed. English language learners have increased so that we're at 13.2% of the students receiving ELL services. Percent attending 95% is something we're going to come back to in later slides, but it's decreased fairly dramatically from 71.2% in 2014-15 to 64.9%. And when we analyze the results, especially for our mathematics, we found that the largest correlate with the decrease in mathematics proficiency and growth was attendance. So we've been working really hard, and my colleagues will talk about the attendance initiatives that we have in place. Our demographics, you can see the percent students, white American students has dropped from 53% to 49.7% last year. So we're more than 50% diversity based on racial, ethnic, and we have had a little bit of increase in poverty as well. So,
David, Madam Chair, David,
Yes,
before you go on,
please.
the first three groups, free, reduced, special education, English language learners, are there duplicates in each of those groups
Yeah.
that they could be maybe in all three?
You could be in all three. So when we put together the challenge index, we add up the percent of each of these, but some students could be in just one and some in all three. So that's a very good point. When we look specifically at the attendance trends, it was elementary and high school that had the big drops this last year. And this is the percentage of students attending 95% of possible days. If you had 8 absences, you would be right at 95%. So students who are enrolled the whole year that miss more than 8 times would be in this category of less than 95%. And so we did this analysis and found in elementary especially, there's a very high correlation with proficiency and growth in math, and we're addressing that, with our attendance initiatives. When you look across grade levels, you can see that in reading, we're still at 50% or higher for every one of the grade levels. And that's sort of been a benchmark for us since that's the national norm. Grade 9 has the highest percentage of students hitting growth targets with 67.2, and grade 4 had the lowest with 50.3. So this was a decline, but we were still ahead of where we were in 2014-15. Last year we had a very high growth, high proficiency year, and this year we dropped back. The growth by racial ethnic group, you can see that ELL students actually increased from 47 to 48%. Free and reduced price lunch stayed about the same at 50.5%, but we did have Hispanic students below the 50% level with 49.4% proficient. And even we did see reductions across most of the groups. When we looked at our QComp goal, then we didn't hit our QComp goal this year, and we've been hitting our QComp goal as a district fairly consistently up until this year. The math growth is the biggest concern. We went from 58% of the students hitting their national growth targets down to 51.2%. So a 7-point drop is a very significant drop. Again, we see grade 9 was the highest, but we see most of the grades had a reduction. And in particular, grade 2, we dropped from 57 to 48% of the students hitting their growth targets, and grade 4, we went from 56% to 34%. And this is where we did an analytic analysis to see what factors contributed, and the attendance was the number one predictor, but the second predictor was kind of surprising. Although we'd heard from principals that they were concerned with this, it was the amount of time students were taking on the math test. And we saw very significant declines, and so we wanted to check with all the principals to see, if they think kids aren't taking the test as seriously. We've moved from having a kind of a tight, structured lab setting to having testing in the classroom, and then, it seems like, for whatever reason, students were rushing through. Now we're able to identify on the MAP test whether students are rushing through, and the computer will let us know, so we can decide whether we have to invalidate the test or not. Now, if they take less than 7 minutes on the test, a test that's supposed to take 45 to 60 minutes, then it automatically invalidates. But this is something that all the buildings have been working on to make sure that the atmosphere is appropriate for testing with good lighting, good seating, that students are, kind of prompted to do their best on the test. And what we find is some students were clicking through really fast without even reading the question. So reading the question, narrowing the answers down to 2 probable possible answers, and then guessing is just fine. If you get that first question wrong, you'll get an easier question, and the test gradually moves into the level of proficiency the student is at. So it's a test that challenges everybody, but it shouldn't wipe them out. So we shouldn't have students giving up on the test. So that's another area. And the third area was the amount of time that teachers were spending out of the classroom was also significant, and that was especially associated with PD. So teachers that had a lot of PD during one year tended to have lower math scores as well. So those are the 3 areas, and all 3 of those are areas that we can work on. The next graph has the math growth by racial ethnic, and you can see that, again, Hispanic students dropped from 49 to 43%, hitting growth targets. American Indians from 49 to 44. White students from 63 to 56%. So it's pretty much across the board. All of the groups of students tended to do less well on the math. In MCA, we also saw a decrease of about 1.8% in reading for the total group. Grade 10 did well, though, at 61%. Grade 8, 60%. We were down to 53% in grade 7, 52% in grade 4. And so, again, the reading results declined both in terms of growth and proficiency. The math results declined a little bit more, so we went from about 60% proficient in math to 58%, and in particular, grade 7 dropped from 60 to 53%, and grade 4 dropped from 56 to 51. So all the teams, grade level teams in the buildings are looking at these data and trying to determine what skills students are lacking, if there are particular sub-skills within mathematics or within reading that they can concentrate, and the team will talk about the strategies that they're using. The MCA by subgroup also showed declines for most of the subgroups. In this case, the area that's multiple races actually increased, whereas, and free and reduced lunch stayed about the same. EL, again, increased. So we saw an increase both in growth and in proficiency. This is the state versus Minnesota, and we can see that in reading, we did see the state go down 1.5 points, but the district went down almost 4 points. So sometimes they make the test a little bit harder, and you see everybody go down, but in this case, we went down more than the state did. In math, we see proficiency levels dropping from 54% to 50%, so more of a drop than for reading. 7th grade, again, dropped 10 points, and 5th grade was down about 8 points. And so each of those grade level teams, again, are working to determine what are the specific areas for individual students as well as groups of students, and making sure that we do differentiated instruction to meet the needs of these students. This one's quite blurry for some reason, and it is math by racial ethnic group, and it shows that basically all of the racial ethnic groups declined in math proficiency as well. Okay, then here's growth, and the state has gotten rid of its growth model where it produced a single score called MMR, and it was based 2/3 on growth. But the original growth model that we put in place about 7 years ago is still on the website, and I think it's quite helpful. So it shows whether students made low growth, high growth, or medium growth. And the state as a whole had 27% of students making low growth. We had 27% low growth in reading. We had somewhat higher high growth, though. So we did a little bit better in terms of growth on the MCA than the state as a whole. And then in math, we did quite a bit worse than the state, with 35% of our students making low growth versus 30% for the state, and we only had 21% high growth. So all of the data that we're showing today suggests that intensity of instruction and focus on math made sense, and that's what the team has been doing. Then we compare ourselves to other districts that have similar challenge index. Invergrowth Heights, West St. Paul, Osseo, South St. Paul, and Roseville are the ones with the closest challenge index. And we see that in reading proficiency, we're sort of in the middle of the pack. South St. Paul is the lowest, and West St. Paul was the highest. In reading growth, again, there are a couple districts that are higher and a couple districts that are lower. In math proficiency and math growth, we had the bigger challenge, and in this case, 50.7, only South St. Paul was lower, and in math growth, only South St. Paul was lower. So this is our challenge, and every year we'll do these comparisons, and one of the reasons we do this is, can we find districts that we can partner with, that we can find out what's going on, and we've got an agreement with West St. Paul that they shared their data with us, and we found that they were making great growth with English language learners, for example. And so we're going to continue to do this to try to get comparable data, not just on the MCAs, but also on the NWA, so we can find the beat the odds districts and work with them. So that's the short presentation for tonight, and now we pass it back to Andy for the rest.
Can I, before we go forward, can I ask just two questions, David?
Fine with the chair, it's fine with me.
Is that okay? I'll try and make them
Remember
quick.
the time.
So I heard fourth grade come up a number of times, and then attendance. Do we know what's impacting student attendance? So the first question is, do we know what we can do to help our fourth graders? And then attendance. Do we know what we can do to help impact that? If they miss 8 times, they're at 95%.
Yep. I'm gonna let my colleagues take both of those questions, and if you weren't planning to take them right away, we were planning to address both attendance and achievement, especially math achievement.
Real quick.
Director Bergstrom, in terms of attendance, each building is working on specific attendance goals this year. We've got Julie Campanelli from Learning Supports working with buildings to help meet those goals, and how we're meeting them is intensive outreach to families who we know are struggling with attendance, as well as sort of more general spotlight on how important attendance is at the building goals that they set. They're doing announcements at the elementary school, probably on a weekly basis at most buildings, talking about our attendance was here last week, let's shoot for this next week. So there's a number of ways that we're addressing the attendance issue, and I'm looking forward to seeing an improved attendance for this school year based on those efforts.
Okay.
Can I just say that if you think that your questions for, I know there's another question coming over here. If you think that your questions might have a chance of being answered in their program plans, let's let them get through that part, and then maybe we can do all of them. If you don't think it's going to be addressed in there, I guess you can ask it now.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a few questions, but you can either answer them now or just send us an email. But I was wondering if you would have more information about the relationship between attendance and demographics. If you could give us more specific information about that. Do we have specific groups of students that are?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do. And I've presented to the Somali group, the American Indian parent group, and for each of the groups, I do a separate report breaking down which grade levels within each of those categories. So I can go as deep as you would like me to do. For this particular part, we just went at the high
Okay.
level.
Yeah, I was curious to know a little bit more about that. Unfortunately, we only have 1 hour today. And so the other thing is, when you talk about the kids taking the MAP test, and one of the reasons possibly of not having seen the increase in the results, you talk about students maybe rushing through the test. Also, I will be curious to know if there's a relationship between demographics, which group of kids did we see maybe not taking their time to go through the whole 45 minutes of the test, or if something happened there that we could be related to demographics. We're seeing that change in demographics as well, which is, seems like it's a little bit, but it could be very significant when it comes to those results. So I'm curious to know more about that too. And another question I have is regarding the MAP test. How many times do the kids took the test, and is there any difference this year in the amount of times that the kids are taking the MAP test?
Yes, we did fall map testing so that we could set goals for each individual student based on the fall assessment. And we're doing winter math only because we really want to see mid-year whether we're on track to hit our goals and not wait until the end of the year. So schools will be testing mid-year math after the winter break.
So they'll be taking a total of 2 or 3 for this school year?
This school year, we'll have 3 assessments for math and 2 for reading.
3 for math and 2 for reading. And
Yes.
what about last year? Was it 2 or 3?
Last year, we had 2 for reading and 2 for math, with first and second grade being mandated in the fall and other grade levels optional. Some schools do fall, winter, spring, optional, but those were the ones that were mandated.
Okay.
Mr. Bergstrom, did you have another question? You only got your first one done.
Nope,
Okay.
I trust that the answer will come with our
Okay.
fourth graders.
All right, thank you. All right, can we move on then? All right, go ahead.
Okay. I got a foot in both worlds, just moving from learning supports into learning and teaching. So I need another piece that I would add to Dr. Melby's piece is educating our parents about how important it is that their kids are in school. And so I'll just a quick vignette. I mean, I do what I do. I've been in the Bloomington for 20 plus years. My wife is a teacher here. When our oldest son last year, his report card came back, and we noticed that he had 10 absences And so it floored us because, and here are two people who are perceivably well plugged into the system, but, a couple of out-of-town tournaments and sick 3 times, and it adds up fast. And so here are people, our family who was, like I said, pretty well plugged into the system, and we were shocked. So we need to do the service of the people who, for one reason or another, aren't plugged into the system and help them understand the importance of the attendance piece. So with that, we'll move on to our program update. And so as Dr. Heisted talked about, there are 5 goals that are set by the state. And there's a lot of things going on. I know there's a lot of questions about some of it as well. And so I just wanted to take some time and go over with my colleagues here, go over a high-level view of what we're doing for each of the goals. And so I'll start. First goal is Bloomington Public Schools, aim to ensure all students are ready for school. And so most of this work gets done by our early childhood team. And so not to have 50 people up here, I'll speak on behalf of that team and met with some of my team members to make sure that I had all their talking points. So the first thing, excuse me, that they wanted to highlight was standards-based core instruction. So we know that in many senses, standard-based is probably one of the best equity things that we can do. We're holding everybody to the same standard. That's an important piece. And so the early childhood group are doing that around core instruction as well. So teams develop comprehensive units of study that integrate the 8 domains of early childhood indicators of progress, and the units include language support for emergent multilingual children. So I think that's really important. Beth Stingline's behind me here to talk about. In other words, working with our EL department to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our youngest learners. Evidence-based practices, so Rachel Jens beside me would be probably kick me in the shins if I didn't say that we're moving away from research-based practices to evidence-based. And so we want to make sure that these are proven strategies, and early childhood is no different. And so that group, working with an instruction team, adopted the 12 evidence-based practices that align with Striving Readers Comprehensive Literacy Grant, that you'll probably hear more about in a second here, to work with our birth through 5-year-olds. We talked about standards-based instruction, core instruction, then we need to have standard-aligned reporting practices. And so they've worked on that as well. A team of early learning and district staff selected a new assessment tool for use in preschool. It's called TS Gold. Dr. Heisted's probably the best expert on that assessment. So teachers in their 3- and 4-year-old programs utilized common end-of-unit assessments. Common is the operative word, making sure that across sites are using the same assessment so that they can compare results and strengths, which are aligned to the TS Gold measure. And then the last piece is that professional development. Teachers and support staff participated in ongoing professional development related to supporting emergent multilingual children and evidence-based literacy practices. So a bunch of words in there too, evidence-based for one for sure, and then again highlighting the work that they're doing with our EL group. And so that's 4 of the many things that we're doing to get at making sure that all students are ready for school. Continuing with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
We continue to work on those culturally responsive teaching strategies that really make a difference with students and families. And in the early learning programs that we have, the QComp coach at that level, Tim Suzuki, has had extensive training in these strategies, but also with the lens of our early childhood learners. He has specialized in this age group, and he is really doing a wonderful job supporting the teachers around both the best practices for early childhood, but making sure that these culturally responsive strategies are being seen in the classroom. Our professional learning communities continue to be robust, and again this year we have virtually every teacher in our district participating in one of these learning communities. I reviewed all the goals that they have set this year, and I see just high rigor for all of our students and very comprehensive action plans that include using those strategies that they know can make a difference for all of our students, but in particular our students that aren't being as successful as we would like them to be. These strategies create relevance for all students at every level, which I will reiterate with the other goals, but especially for our early learners. And for them to learn effectively, they need to have something relevant in their lives. And we see that happening across the board at early childhood.
All right, our second goal is to have our third graders reading proficiently at grade level. We continue to really focus on providing high-quality core instruction to all students as a primary strategy for meeting this goal. And so we're implementing integrated units of study that feature reading, writing, speaking, oral language, and media literacy standards together to really emphasize the relationship that oral language has with reading and that reading has with writing. Those all impact each other. They're reciprocal processes. We are also really working with our English learner program staff to make sure that those units are accessible to English learners and that they feature supports like sentence frames, visual representations of that difficult academic language that we're having our students work on, and then also discussion protocols. So students are learning how to talk about the text that they're reading and writing about with one another. One of our second key strategies is what Andy referred to earlier, our focus on evidence-based practices. So looking at the practices that have a substantial body of research and evidence behind them, showing that they are effective. We've moved to a model in which we are training our elementary principals, teacher leaders, and at the elementary level, our literacy coaches on these practices, so that then they are equipped in turn to serve as the professional development providers at their sites. So this strategy of doing more embedded professional development work, we're hoping that gets us away from having to pull teachers from their classrooms to do that professional learning. If we can provide the professional learning right on site for them using these leaders, that will allow them to still get the professional development support they need to change their practices, while also addressing that issue Dave referred to earlier about too much time out of the classroom. And then on one additional layer, we're working with our reading interventionists on targeted interventions. So we provided training to them on how to use diagnostic literacy assessments to really pinpoint some of the root causes of students' difficulties with learning to read, and then to select interventions that target that particular root cause. This year, our interventionists were also trained in 2 different intervention programs, PRESS, which is through the University of Minnesota, as well as the Sunday system, which is an evidence-based intervention that's really designed for students who have dyslexia or exhibit characteristics that are similar to dyslexia. So we're really making a strong effort to match students to the intervention that's going to be best suited for the areas of reading that they're struggling with.
And again, we continue to focus on those culturally responsive teaching strategies at all levels, but in particular, as we're developing those early readers, we need to change the way we teach to meet the needs and to differentiate from our students that have such great needs. So we see the PLCs at that kindergarten and first and second and third grade level with a high focus on literacy, working on that decoding, working on comprehension, and continuing to grow the vocabulary of all students. The PLCs at this level work in mainly grade level teams. We do have some specialist and intervention teams, and they are changing what they're doing and really paying attention to the assessments and putting in more formative assessments. So not only can they analyze the data as instructors to change when needed, but they can also provide that specific feedback to both students and families on what they need to do to improve.
All right, our next goal is to close the achievement gap in reading and math. We do see our curriculum review process as a strategy to do this. One of the key components of that process is really looking to make sure that the materials we're selecting are culturally and linguistically responsive to students' needs. One of the issues with math is often students question, how is this math going to help me in the future, right? It doesn't feel relevant to them. And so a lot of our professional development work and the work that we're doing in curriculum review is to find ways to make math meaningful to all students and to show them what the connection is to real life with that. In addition to that review process, we had a multi-tiered systems of support district team that really worked together to strengthen systems for both intervention and enrichment related to reading and math for all students, K through 12. Our digital technology specialists, our digital learning specialists, led cohorts of teachers who looked at how they can better use technology to differentiate for all students. And then again, I'll mention professional development. One of the questions that was asked earlier was about that fourth grade slide. So how do we make sure that we see alignment between the standards that are taught in third grade and how those standards are preparing students for the level of learning at fourth grade? A lot of our professional development efforts focus around understanding grade level standards as well as the alignment of standards across, and then the practices that I mentioned earlier are used to make math relevant for all students. So most of our professional development efforts this year, we're not letting reading go, but are heavily focused around math given what we've seen in our scores.
We continue to have very robust summer and after-school learning programs for those students that need that extra boost. Rachel and I just spent, some time this week talking with MDE about how we can make sure that those best practices in literacy not only happen in the classroom during the school year, but within our summer programming. So we're really excited about what's coming up next summer. Our after-school programs are a combination of reteach, but also in providing an opportunity for students to do it in a way that it's not the same. Very innovative ways to provide enriching experiences after school for those students that need that boost. The culturally responsive teaching, as we keep reiterating in this presentation, is so important if we're going to close those achievement gaps. We have to realize that every student is unique and needs something different to succeed. So we train all of staff in the beginning of the year and model those culturally responsive teaching strategies, but we work with our PLC facilitators twice a year, giving them those strategies and then reinforcing it when we have opportunities to do professional development at the site. We're very fortunate as the mentors and the QComp coaches in the district to work one-on-one with staff. And we're collecting data this year on what do our teachers need. And we're doing it teacher by teacher because we know we have to teach students that way and we have to provide that same kind of support. So what are our teachers asking for? What do they need, and how can we provide that in a consistent way and in collaboration with the rest of the teaching and learning team? We also work very closely with the EL department with Beth Stenglein and Carrie Young. We continue to do a lot of professional development together so that our team is well aware of the strategies that EL students need to be successful in class.
At the high school level, one of our strategies for ensuring that our students are graduating from high school is to maintain a very robust set of course offerings for students. And so we strive to make sure that students have opportunities to take courses that both meet academic standards and graduation requirements, as well as courses that allow them to really explore their interests and potential future career aspirations. So to that end, 15 new courses, you see the titles of those courses on this slide, were developed last year to expand the courses that we offer to students. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that additional 12 online courses were developed or modified from face-to-face courses. They were transferred into online courses to provide students with flexibility of how they meet those graduation requirements. We've also have support programs in place at our high schools like AVID, Academic Seminar, to provide both intervention and enrichment for students who are struggling to pass their classes or to meet those academic standards. And then finally, as Kelly has mentioned previously, our PLCs are one of the primary tools that we use to provide support to students around their graduation requirements.
The fifth goal, Bloomington Public Schools aim for all students to be ready for career and college. I think this is where we've made really, really great strides. If you just look over at our strategic plan in the picture, that's what we're striving to do. And so formulating those pathways to career and college. So one of the things that we've been working on is just programmatic alignment. We've got a lot of different programs for kids, but how do they align together? How do we make sure that we're not looking for the same quote-unquote customer, if you will, making sure that, as Rachel just talked about, we're meeting the needs of all students. So looking through that alignment through our PGP. And I've been here before in a different role talking about the PGP. I got to be part of a group today who got to see the PGP and how it is going to be rolled out on the phone. It's live right now. Pretty exciting stuff that's happening there. But also our career and technical education, or our CTE program, our counseling standards. How are we aligning all of that work together to make sure that there are efficiencies in the way that we make sure students are ready to go to their career, or if they choose to go to college? We often talk about students and what we need to do to help them if they're struggling, but we should also be talking about students who are doing very well and still need to be challenged. And so the last part there is access to college courses. So early access to college courses is offered to high school students demonstrating need and readiness. And so it's provided through several options, 4 listed here: concurrent enrollment, post-secondary enrollment options, Dimensions Academy High School. I took some time today to go to Normandale Community College with Aaron Boltek to watch those students in a college setting. Fascinating. And then our Bloomington Career and College Academy as well.
We have a Pathways Advisory Committee that you are all familiar with that provides regular feedback about issues related to curriculum instruction and assessment. Last year, our Pathways Advisory Committee provided really valuable feedback on the 4 things that you see listed on this slide. We went through a new curriculum adoption in physical education, and they provided input on that curriculum review. They also offered some insights into how we can expand our college and career readiness implementation efforts and how we can better align our work at the early childhood level to make the transition for our students coming from preschool programs into elementary an even smoother transition. And then finally, they offered us input on our local literacy plan.
Oh, I get the clicker too. The World's Best Workforce report that goes to MDE has been combined, and last year we gave a combined report with achievement integration as well. This year the template that goes into MDE has a combo report. So I'm here to give you an update on achievement and integration. As you all know, every 3 years we're required to submit a new plan. Our last plan was submitted in March of 2017, runs through June 30th of 2020. The plan has to be and is aligned with our World's Best Workforce plan. Last bullet point, Indian Mounds likely included in next plan. We've been working with MDE. Indian Mounds is identified as a racially identifiable school, so we'll be working on a plan to include Indian Mounds throughout the rest of the school year. I think our deadline to get that done is the end of the school year. I just found out today, so we'll be back with more on that. things going on to meet the goals in the Achievement Integration Plan. We want to increase achievement, provide programming for support options, and promote college and career readiness for underserved students in our school district. How do we do that? We've had a lot of success over the last few years with a Check and Connect program. That was started to be implemented probably 4 years ago or so. Dr. Heist has done some research this fall and found that the students who are taking part in this Check and Connect program have statistically, easy for me to say, significant improved attendance, which when you tie back to the things that were discussed earlier, that's very important, and also show improvement in their reading scores, maybe not as statistically significant, but improved when checked against a matched sample of students. Did I get that right, Dr. Heisted?
Yes.
All right. We also, you've heard a little bit, and I know we fly fast and high at this meeting, but the AVID program and our own Sparks program that Kelly Kalorn spearheads in the district, our Nobel program, which is our gifted and talented middle school arts program at Valley View Middle School, the mentoring that happens through our Office of Educational Equity, the leadership group that they run in the Office of Educational Equity when they meet on weekends with huge groups of kids and their parents often. It's not to play Yahtzee and watch movies. They do all sorts of important work with those kids and families, including lots of education around our personalized growth plan and how that works with and benefits students and families in the district. We've increased our professional development opportunities. We've increased the number of trainings that our Office of Educational Equity is doing at buildings this year. I was just talking with Brian Ingeman this week, and he's been particularly happy with the work being done in conjunction with OEE at Oak Grove Middle School as one example. Seed trainings continue, and then building-specific equity plans, which you've heard about and will continue to hear about. Also, a commitment to implement practices to recruit and employ and support racially and linguistically diverse staff. To that end, we've had numerous discussions with Dr. Khalifa from the University of Minnesota. This year, right now, as we speak, there's a principal work group working in conjunction with HR to improve our procedures and our processes to hopefully recruit and retain more staff of color, and partnerships that we form with folks in the community, and in particular with universities and colleges in the community. I know that I'm watching my clock, Chair Steigoff, or my watch, so I know that was a quick 2 slides. We'll definitely be back with more about Indian Mounds, I think, in the future, and then I'm doing some board workshops coming up here in January and through the rest of the year around equity work as well. So thanks for the time.
Thank you, everyone. So, board members, if you have questions, you're going to have to send them to them. This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.